All right, man, we are live. Welcome to Calix Boxing. I'm your host, Calix Boxing. Hit that sub button for nightly boxing videos. You are now tuned into the podcast, Calcast Volume 2. On this episode, going to hit on a couple things. The video of the day, which goes to D-Style, who was praising the PBC earlier. Obviously, I have a disagreement with it. Most of the video I'm good with, but we have a disagreement. I'm going to touch on that. A quick video response on that. Also, I'm looking at my notes here. I'm going to touch on the comment section. Canelo and McGregor had, a back and forth. So that's interesting. And then we're going to explore the interwebs together. Look at some video, some posts, some articles out there, and then touch on that. And we'll discover that together because I haven't even looked at those. So some interesting things and a bit of news. Golovkin versus Kell Brook prediction video is going to come soon. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. I'll probably have that posted either late tonight or late tomorrow. First of all, let's get into the comment section. If I can pull it up here. Some comments over the past day since I've been told I'm not too good at comments. I'm looking at the comments here from the past day. The first one I wanted to touch on, shout out to Sean Newton, gave me some props on a video I did. So shout out to him. He does some good videos as well. But ANTKITT78 left a couple comments on the Andre Ward lacks power video. I'm going to try to read this. Dude, your argument is that Ward has no power. Where's your boxing IQ? Your argument makes no sense. Ward has a heck. All right, first of all, it does make sense because his KO percentage is 50%, and he hasn't been knocking anybody out in his past few fights, and he hasn't been fighting top competition. So it's clear that if he has a 50% KO percentage at 168, it's not going to translate to 175. He didn't have power at 168. He's obviously not going to have power at 175. So it is a plausible opinion that to deduct that Andre Ward doesn't have power, and it could backfire on him against Sergey Kovalev if they do get in the ring in November. Furthermore, he says, Ward has a heck of a lot more tools to use against Cove than Cove does to Ward. That's debatable. I mean, you could argue that. You can make that argument, but it's not about who has the most tools. It's about who can utilize the tools they have in that fight and how they match up together. I just think Kovalev's power, his chin, and Andre Ward's lack of power will be the key here. And I think Kovalev's footwork is better than people give it credit for. And I don't think that Andre Ward's cagey tactics will work throughout 12 rounds to get a decision against Kovalev. And he doesn't have the power to, in my opinion, to knock out Kovalev. So that's where I'm at with it. I don't see why that's a crazy opinion. Cove will get dismantled. He will be stripped away of everything he liked to do in the ring come fight night. It's quite the statement. Cove never been in serious situation where he has to adjust to another boxer's style or styles in Ward case, because Ward give you different looks in the ring, and that specific technique will be a big factor in later rounds. Ward gives you different looks. Ward can go A to B to C, plan B, plan C if it's not working. Yes, obviously Ward is a diverse fighter. However, to say that Kovalev has never had to adjust in the ring would be false. He did in the first Pascal fight. For instance, Pascal was giving him some problems early in the fight, was catching him with some big shots. Kovalev made adjustments. Kovalev is better prepared for this fight, in my opinion, because in the last couple fights, he has fought guys with awkward styles, and that obviously gets him prepared for a guy with an awkward style or a cagey style. And Ward, this is a huge step up for Ward. This is the best fighter that Ward has faced, and Ward's probably the best fighter Kovalev has faced, but there isn't as much of a gap in what these guys have been doing as far as competition level in the past few fights. There's a huge gap in competition level when you go from what Ward has been doing the past couple fights to fighting Kovalev. Huge difference. Furthermore, he says, you think punching power is a factor for Ward, whether he has power of fighting an opponent that has power, it is not a problem. I don't understand what that even means. I suggest Cove don't rely on power or underestimate Ward, because that will be Kove's downfall. My whole point with the video was that Kovalev knows that Ward doesn't have power, and Ward's gonna have problems keeping Kovalev honest walking forward. And I don't see how that's gonna change, and I don't see how that's gonna affect the fight. Maybe Ward has more tools. Maybe he'll outbox Kovalev. Maybe you're right on that, but that doesn't change the fact that Ward doesn't have power. It just doesn't. He adds in another comment, Kove has to pull a Canelo and get clean flush, or otherwise it's a long night for him. I'm guessing what he's saying is Kovalev has to land a flush big shot early in the fight, or it's going to be a long night for him. He's comparing, from what it seems like to me, Canelo versus Mayweather and Kovalev versus Ward, and I don't see much of the comparison, to be honest. Canelo didn't have the foot speed to cut off the ring against Mayweather, and he followed him around the whole night, and he didn't make it a brawl. Kovalev isn't going to have problems chasing Ward around the ring if Ward shows lateral movement throughout the fight. And I don't think Ward's going to fight that type of fight anyway. I think he's going to fight a cagey type of fight and try to wrap Kovalev up and make this an ugly fight. So I don't see really a comparison there as well. BJR commented on the Alfredo Angulo prediction video, basically saying Angulo versus Margarito or Kirkland rematch. Those are the only fights I'd be interested in seeing Angulo. And I agree. As far as Angulo goes, he first of all, he has to get past Freddie Hernandez this weekend. Got to take care of that. If he takes care of that, Margarito, yes. A lot of people want to see that fight. Kirkland, if Kirkland's in jail right now. So if Kirkland gets out of jail, makes parole, does whatever he has to do, I don't even know what he's in jail for. I just know he's in jail. I don't know how long he's in jail, but if it's one of those short stints and he gets out, I'd love to see Angulo versus Kirkland rematch. I'm all for good fights. And if these guys decide they want to keep fighting and make themselves brain dead later on in life, like I said, I'm pretty libertarian on that. I don't care. Just as long as the fights are good, as a fight fan, I just want to see good fights. So if don't step Angulo up and try to, he's at 168. So don't try to put him in there with the top 10 168 pounders. It's not going to work. It's just not. The writing's on the wall for Angulo. So these novelty fights are better. These novelty fights make sense. So as long as these guys are on the same career trajectory and they're all washed up and they fight each other, I'm fine with that. Go on the seniors tour and make some money. I'm okay with that. He also says Guerrero is done as a top fighter. He's merely just a name now. That was on the Robert Guerrero prediction video. I agree. No, done. It depends on how you define done. He's still fighting. He can still make decent fights against decent, okay opposition. Entertaining fights. He's a fun fighter to watch. He gets in there and mixes it up. Just look at the Common Guy fight. But Guerrero obviously has a ceiling. Every elite fighter he steps up against, he loses. So we know he's not an elite fighter, but as long as he's in there with fun fighters, then it's fun, and I'm okay with it. If they put him in there with Errol Spence, which they'll probably do later this year or early next year, that's what I'm thinking, he's going to lose. He's just going to lose the fight. He's going to be outclassed. But you can put him in there in the mix with good fighters, and I'd be fine with it. Perfectly fine with it. Let's see. Christopher Carlson, Robodope Radio. Shout out to him and shout out to Robodope Radio. They showed me love back in the day and put me on to work the podcast with them. So co-host with them. So that was fun. So shout out to Christopher Carlson, who's still out there making the videos, and go sub to his channel. But this was, as far as the video last night, this is a comment of the video last night, Calcast Volume 1, when we were talking about Triple G. I don't think Triple G should have to move up and is clearly getting ducked by middleweights. True, we're in agreement there. But remember, GGG, Tom, and Abel opened the door for criticism when they proclaimed anyone from 154 to 168 and then changed it for Canelo and Ward. Once again, true. He did say 154 to 168. Abel Sanchez said the same thing. Now they seem to be, I was watching the Abel Sanchez video with Radio Raheem yesterday, and he was basically saying right now we're at 160, and eventually when we outgrow the division and we take care of 160, we move up to 168. Once again, it seems to be Before they won at 168, now not so much. But I'm fine with him staying at 160. Look, if social media was around when Bernard Hopkins was at 160, it would change our view of Bernard Hopkins. Like, people would have been hammering Bernard Hopkins for fighting mandatory after mandatory after mandatory. They would have been calling for him to step up and fight guys like Calzaghe earlier. They would have been calling for him to step up and fight guys like James Toney and just guys who were at 168 who had bigger names than guys who were at 160. So they would have been calling for that as well. I understand what Triple G is trying to do. I totally sympathize with Triple G for not getting the fights he wants. Look, when all of your peers at 160, in and around 160, are ducking you, what much can you do? I'm going to go on record once again and say I don't like the Kell Brook fight. I don't like it. I don't like him fighting at 147, but it's more of an indictment on boxing than it is Triple G. But Triple G is not above criticism at the same time. And he shouldn't be fighting a 147-pounder, just my opinion. GGG is too popular to worry about collecting every belt because every other opponent will be mandatory and some shitty like Wade. No more mismatches like that. No one kills HBO's budget. Golovkin is a star who now has the worst haters and fanboys. True. Ward needing tune-ups to face top 5 pound for pound after years on shelf is different than GGG moving up to a weight he said he could dominate. I don't know about that. If you ask Andre Ward, I'm sure he said he would say he could dominate 175, but after the tune-ups, I'm not sure about that statement. I'm not sure there's much difference from that. What I don't like is guys saying in the same breath, okay, Ward can go up to 175, but he needs tune-ups first. And then they demand Golovkin go up to 168 and face Andre Ward or James DeGale right away. Be consistent with that. That's my only point with that. But I'm not sure. I'm not going to comment on that because I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. So we'll move on from there. And shout out to all the viewers. I got like 12 viewers on right now. So shout out to y'all. Let me hop on real quick and do the video response to D-Style. D-Style dropped a video. I got the note here. PBC, future pay-per-view, how boxing was hijacked from the poor. In this video, I agree with most of what he's saying as far as lazy promoters, pay-per-views, premium TVs, premium networks, and boxing getting off of network TV, creating a vacuum for a guy like Al Heyman, who has come in and invested in boxing, isn't lazy, is outsmarting guys, is putting a lot of time in, hustling, and just not being as lazy as these promoters, and taking advantage of the situation that these promoters, managers, networks have created. I'm in complete agreement, and I've been on the front lines with him over the years in calling out these promoters. You got to remember, my most popular video on here did like 70-something thousand views, is calling out Bob Arum. It's called Screw You, Bob Arum, where I called out Bob Arum for like 10 minutes and laid into him. So I'm not in bed with it. I think they're all evil. Promoters, as Bernard Hopkins once said, promoters are a necessary evil, but they're all evil. So I'm not in bed with any of them. To me, like I stated in a video last week, I'm against whatever gets in the way of me watching good fights at the end of the day, or watching good sports. I'm against that. I'm against whatever hurdle gets in the way of me watching good fights. So I'm not going to stop calling out promoters and managers just because they're investing more into the sport. If they're making the same mistakes as these promoters and managers in the past, then they need to be called out on it. Point blank, period. Al Heyman is not above criticism. And my issue with the PBC is, and has been since it started, First of all, I'm going to link this article below. If you look at the Bloody Elbow article that came out last month, I believe, and the PBC is now being sued for $925 million because that's what they've spent in the event. I'm not going to go too much into that because I'm not a lawyer. I can't say if this lawsuit has legs or not. And he's also being sued for, they're saying he's violating the Muhammad Ali Act. But what is not disputable is they're bleeding money. If you look at the numbers that's in this article, they've lost. They're in the red over $500 million. It's like $577 billion. So they've been bleeding money, which they expected. It was part of the model. They're expecting to lose money, but I don't think they're expecting to lose that much money in the first 3 to 5 years. They're 3 years into this thing now. For me, I have to start seeing results. My first issue, there are multiple issues I have with the PBC. Like I said, coming in, the PBC was supposed to be different than what we've seen in the past. It was supposed to be more transparent. It's supposed to be the belts are out of the way. We're not going to have belts in the ring. Everything's going to be more clean. The problem with that is Al Haymon wanted to get away from 1 million guys behind fighters in the ring. No belts coming into the ring with fighters. The problem with that is you have to, it's part of boxing. Characters are a part of boxing. I like seeing 5 guys behind a fighter walking into the ring with gold teeth. I like seeing that dude with platinum teeth the Asian dude with platinum teeth walking into the ring with Danny Garcia. I like seeing stuff like that. It adds character to the fight. It adds character to the fighter. He got away from that. On paper, it was a good thing, make it more clean, but it's kind of like when you buy a rap CD when you were younger. You want the explicit version. You don't want the cleaned up version. You want the real version. And that's what I want to see with boxing. I want to see boxers with their entourages. I want to see all that. So there's a point where it gets to be a little too clean and whatnot, and we want to see the character. But that's a small thing that can be worked out. That's fine. But he wanted to get away from the belts getting in the way of good fights. The belts are still getting in the way of good fights. Errol Spence just had to fight Bundo because he was the mandatory to get to Kell Brook. Errol Spence had multiple guys with the same manager in the top 10 that he could have fought. He didn't have to fight Bundo to get to Kell Brook if we're not worried about the belts. So I guess I had high hopes. Yeah, we're going to get rid of the belts. We're, not get rid of the belts, but we're not going to worry about the belts. We're not going to let the belts get in the way of good fights. We haven't gotten gotten that out of the way. We still have the same thing going on with that. It's not simplified. Like I said, one of the things, we still have the belts. So it's not simple. This was supposed to simplify things. Remember Al Michaels coming on the first fight. He's saying, we're gonna make this more transparent. We're not gonna be worried about belts and sanctioning bodies getting in the way of great fights. We're just gonna put on the best fighting the best, and the production is gonna be great. And look, none of that has happened. None of that has happened. Maybe the production is better. Maybe the trinkets in the background are better, but that's about it. We're not getting the best fights. Let me pull up premierboxingchampions.com so we can look at the schedule coming up. And you can't deny, if you can go on the website and look at the schedule, look at the past fights, everything is there. Guerrero versus Peralta. Boring. Price versus Starks. Come on. Jacobs versus Mora 2. Do we really need to see Jacobs versus Mora 2? Ramirez versus Watts. Smith versus Galarza. Perella versus Yugas. Look, these are the fights you want to see. That's the whole month of September. That's the fall schedule so far. The kids are back in school. The fall schedule is supposed to be ramped up right now. This is what we have instead. Is that up to par with what you want to see? But it's free. Al Haymon's investing. Al Haymon's pulling up the tab. Look, if a guy comes to the bar and buys me a beer and puts it on his tab, and the beer comes back to me and it's stale, yes, it's free, but it's still a stale beer. I would have rather paid $3 for the Bud Light. That's where I'm at with it. I'd rather pay the $30 a month and get the fights I was getting before PBC started. That's where I'm at with it. I mean, let's look up past fights. My issue with it is we were supposed to get better quality fights. We haven't. We've gotten worse quality fights. Dude, you cannot deny that the past 2 years, the schedule and the quality of fights have gone down. You can't deny that. Just look at the schedule. Not even not just Premier Boxing Champions schedule. Look at how it's affected the HBO schedule. And yes, as D-Style pointed out, HBO has a lot to put on themselves. HBO sucked for a while. But HBO, what they were putting on was still better than this. All right, so let's pull up some of the past fights. I mean, Spence versus Bundu. No. Santa Cruz versus Frampton was a good fight. That was a good fight. Stevenson versus Williams, decent fight. But all these other fights, Wilder versus Areola, Lipnitz versus Castillo, Barrios versus Bolcherio, Cherry versus Rhodes, Deloach versus Castillo, Thurman versus Porter was a good fight. Fonfera versus Smith Jr., okay. LaGreco versus whoever. Vasquez versus Boone. Lara versus Marta Rosen. Come on. Millie Vanilli versus Trout and Jackson. DeGale versus Medina. I'd take that. Ortiz versus Berto. Okay. Some good fights mixed in there. But this is 4 months I've just gone by. And those are the only good fights I've named. And I'm passing up a ton of fights. Russell versus Highland. Pedraza versus Smith. Spence versus Algeria. That's a step-up fight. I'll take that. Broner versus Theophane. Easter Jr. versus Mendez. Lipnitz versus Guadalajara. Williams versus Matano. Frampton versus Quigg. I'll take that. But these are so far and few and far between, man. I'm scrolling down and scrolling down and scrolling down. And there's not much of anything. Lara versus Zavik. I'm already in November of 2015, and those are the only good fights I've named. That's it. Man, the fall of 2015 was terrible. I'm not even going to name these fights. Most of these, 90% of these are just terrible fights. Wilder versus Duhaupas. God, come on. Quillen versus Zarafa. Remember that fight? That guy got taken out on a stretcher. That was like 100-1 odds or even over that. So the fights haven't been good. All right, if you're tired of a product and you're setting up a counter product to a product that's been bad, and you invest in that product, the product has to be better than the previous product, and it's not. That's my whole point. And yes, D-Style's pulling. He's making a claim. Al Heyman's not doing anything that these other promoters and managers did in the past. That's exactly my point. But it has been worse. The quality of fights the past 2 years have been terrible, man. Just go and look at the schedules. And look at the schedule from 2013, 2012. It was much better than this. And look, I was complaining with you in the previous years about managers and promoters and us not getting some of the best fights, but it wasn't this bad. It just wasn't. So, and like I said in the comment section below his video, if 2 years of crappy fights gives me some sort of greater good in the future, I'm completely for that. I'm completely for it. But do you see that right now? Do you see a long-term vision from what we've seen so far? Are you really going to trust a guy who's been in the boxing business for 13 years? I believe he started in 2003 with Vernon Forrest, if I'm not mistaken. He's been in the boxing business for 13 years, and he hasn't been that much better than other promoters and managers. And yes, he's invested more. He's used this firm's investment money to invest into boxing. He's more aggressive than these other guys and whatnot. But for now, it just looks like he's investing just for the sake of investing to me. It doesn't look like there's a long-term strategy or plan here. This doesn't look sustainable. There's serious issues with this. And at some point, you have to put on good fights. You just have to. I just don't trust him yet. And no fighter development. That's the other thing. There is no fighter development. Christopher Carlson brought up that Deontay Wilder is doing more people are showing up to his fights and whatnot. You know, I don't know if that would that not have been the case if PBC wasn't around? I don't know. It'd probably still be the same. I mean, he's fighting in Alabama. People are coming out to his fights. I don't know if he's much of a draw outside of Alabama. I just don't see like fighters with Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman. Besides Errol Spence, I don't see these guys developing in their careers going this way, the trajectory going up. I just don't see it. So yeah, I have to see evidence, man. And he compares it to the UFC. Where that falls apart is he says that, okay, Tito Ortiz was the big breakthrough for the UFC. And once the UFC started signing these fighters, that the UFC took off. The problem with that comparison is Al Heyman already has the fighters. He already has a stable at the genesis of this thing. He had Floyd Mayweather. He has all these guys. Look at his lineup at welterweight. He's got all these guys who can fight each other. He's got this, and we're not making money yet. There comes a point in time when these contracts end and the investors run out of money, and instead of relying on the investors' money, he has to rely on these networks coming to him and saying, okay, we want to re-up. We want to re-up these contracts, and we're going to give you money this time. From what you've seen so far, are you confident that the networks are going to give him the money to continue this model? I don't know. I don't see it. I just don't see the comparison with the UFC. I don't. I don't know, man. I'm not buying the PBC yet. I hope I'm completely wrong. I don't want to see this fail. I'd love to see great fights on network TV. I would love. I hope it succeeds, but so far I just don't see it. And the UFC was getting money from Spike. The UFC was putting on the best fighters fighting the best, and the UFC is paying their overhead is much less for fights, for events. Look, Anderson Silva was making like a couple $100,000 per fight fighting on pay-per-view. They're paying Danny Garcia $2 million to fight the Andre Bertos of the world. You don't see that there's a problem when Danny Garcia turns down $4 million to fight Pacquiao. Andre Berto demands $10 million to fight Pacquiao. And then Danny Garcia, instead of fighting Pacquiao, he's going to fight Berto for close to the amount of money that he could have fought Pacquiao. You don't see a problem with that? Doesn't seem sustainable. But we'll see. Maybe in the end, D-Style will be right. Only time will tell. But my biggest problem with it is the fights just are not up to par. I should be looking at the fall schedule right now and seeing September hammered down, October hammered down, November hammered down. I should see a beautiful fall schedule, but I don't. And my response that I get back to that is, but it's free. But Al Heyman's picking up the tab. Thank you, Al Heyman. Thank you for this flat beer. Let's look at some. I wanted to touch on this real quick. I don't understand what Conor McGregor's big deal is with continuing to butt his head into boxing, but it seems to me like Conor really wants to capitalize on this boxing versus UFC thing, and I would not be shocked, dummies in the world, to think that Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather is a good idea. But I saw this article on LA Times where Conor McGregor was taking shots at Canelo, basically saying that the title of the article is Canelo, Conor McGregor trade words over cherry picking claim. Conor McGregor says, if you look at the history of the fight game, especially in this new era, it's full of stars cherry picking their opponents. Can't disagree with them. When they hold a position of power, when they get a name, all of a sudden they pick weaker opponents. They look down to their division. Nobody looks up a division. That seems to be a subliminal shot at Triple G as well. But he's taking a shot at Canelo for not wanting to fight Triple G, not fighting the best, not moving up a weight class, or even, I don't even call it moving up. He's basically at the same weight class, same size as Triple G, and not fighting him. Nobody looks at true challenges, is what he's saying. And he's saying, I moved up a couple weight classes to fight Diaz. I took chances. I lost, but I bounced back. And he's saying, why can't a fighter like Canelo do that? Then once in a blue moon, when the true challenge can't be denied, like the Floyd Mayweather Manny Pacquiao situation, that happens. But when you look at this Canelo Alvarez situation, it's an era of cherry picking. I think we are in an era of cherry picking. And I think Floyd ushered in a ton of fighters who felt like they could cherry pick and still get a lot of money. I was just talking about one of them, Danny Garcia, who turned down Manny Pacquiao because he felt like he wasn't getting enough money, and he's still going to get a ton of money to fight Andre Berto. Canelo's response to that was, I've been fighting the best since I was 23, since a very young age. That's the last thing he could ever speak about me or say about me. But I understand there's people out there that like to talk nonsense and stupidity. So he's taking a shot at McGregor there. McGregor has some, I love to just discredit what McGregor is saying here and take up for a boxer, but I can't really do it here. He's right. Should be fighting Triple G now. Self in trouble by milking these fights, and then a year and a half, I promise, a year and a half, we're going to get this fight, and then a year and a half comes, and then they're still negotiating about it. Canelo should be fighting Triple G right now. McGregor's right. Another article, badlefthook.com, Canelo Alvarez, I would love to fight Manny Pacquiao. I wouldn't be surprised to see that fight next year, especially if Pacquiao doesn't get his Mayweather rematch. He told WBN, I think Floyd Mayweather will fight again. Mayweather thrives in the spotlight so much it will happen. So Canelo thinks that Floyd's going to come back. And he would say, he went on to say, I would love to fight Manny Pacquiao, but that's looking ahead and disrespectful to Liam Smith. Liam Smith is a world champion. Look, you can look past Liam Smith. That card sucks. Liam Smith should not be in the ring with you. But it is good to look ahead to see what's next for Canelo. And to me, I think he'll be fighting a Billy Joe Saunders in December. That would be a step up for him from what he's doing now. And back to the McGregor thing real quick. Canelo does have a right to get a little attitude about that at the same time, because he has gone out of his way to fight guys who people say would give him problems, like the Austin Trouts, like the Erislandy Laras and the Mayweathers. So he has gone out of his way to fight guys who have a tough style for him. And Pacquiao, the same thing. Although he has a style, has a size advantage that would give Pacquiao problems, Pacquiao has a style that would give Canelo a lot of problems. Canelo has shown that he has issues with guys who move laterally. Pacquiao can do that. So it would be a good fight. It would be a good toss-up fight. I would give the edge to Canelo based off the size. I think he'd eventually catch Pacquiao, but I think there's a fight that could possibly happen. I think Oscar could obviously work with Arum at this point, because they don't have much options with the PBC gobbling up a lot of these fighters. So I think that's a fight that could be made, and I'd be for it. I think that would be an exciting fight. So Canelo versus Pacquiao. But as Freddie Roach went on to say in this article, there would have to be a rehydration clause, and the weight would be a big hurdle to overcome. So we'll see. We'll see what's going on with that. But it is good to see Canelo, although I'd rather it be against Triple G than Pacquiao. Looks like Eubank Jr. is set to fight Langford on October 22nd. He had the Triple G fight. He should be fighting Triple G right now. But of course, he was another one in a long line of guys: Sergio Martinez, Canelo, Cotto, who else? Billy Joe Saunders, Danny Jacobs, Peter Quillen, long line of guys Carl Froch, Chavez Jr., long line of guys who did not want it with Triple G. Eubank Jr., you can add to that list. good boys who got good boyed without fighting Triple G. So Abel Sanchez says Brook can't hurt Triple G. It's a 5-6 round fight. Completely agree with that. Sean Porter is chasing a rematch with Keith Thurman. Let's look at this article real quick and touch on this before we wrap things up. That would be an excellent and wonderful fight. Porter set up a rematch with. This is a fight that could possibly happen one day a little further down the line. See, I don't like when fighters say this. It's a fight that could happen, but a little further down the line. He's talking about Errol Spence Jr. here. To me, that's basically saying I don't really want to fight Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. versus Sean Porter is a fight that could easily be made right now. And it's a good fight. Errol hasn't quite gotten to where we're at with the people we want to fight right now. Come on. So now Sean Porter is saying he's above Errol Spence Jr. Based off of what? The Keith Thurmans, the Danny Garcias of the world. Those are the guys who we have unfinished business with. Look, if you want to fight Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, I'm all for it. But don't say you're out of Errol Spence's league. Just say you don't want to fight Errol Spence right now. Just say it. He's looking forward to the next big thing. It's not something that we want to put at this point, but we're definitely working hard at. I call it fight before the fight. It could be a championship fight, blah, 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 blah. So he wants the Thurman fight. He wants the Thurman fight. He wants the rematch. And it was a good fight. So I'd be all for it. Yeah. Match. Now let me get back to the screen. So I thank all the live viewers tonight. Hit me up in the comment section in the archive when you're watching this. And this will be a nightly thing, nightly podcast. And I'll get to the comments live on air and address all the comments and get back to everybody. So I'm going to wrap this thing up. Once again, shout out to everybody who watched. And I just froze up. So once again, hit that sub button. You're tuning in to Calix Boxing. Thanks for listening. Thanks for viewing. Really appreciate the support and more from Calcast in the future. Peace.